We had only been in East Summit for 5 days. The paintings were still on the floor. We hadn't even learned the neighbors' names yet. Then that morning, it hit us like the opening slap of a nightmare we never saw coming. A bright orange notice slapped onto our mailbox. Mailbox color violation. Repaint within 72 hours or face citation. One piece of paper. One mailbox. And suddenly, we were thrown into a war against a fake HOA operating like a suburban mafia, disguised as the Neighborhood Safety Board, policing every blade of grass, every parked car, even a child's sidewalk chalk drawing. But they picked the wrong house. Because my wife, the woman calmly sipping her coffee in the kitchen, is Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. And she doesn't need a badge. She doesn't need a gun. She only needs a USB drive for hidden cameras and one sentence. I'm here to shut it down. If you want to see what happens when abusers of power mess with the wrong woman, don't take your eyes off Real HOA Drama. Hit subscribe so you won't miss the next episode, where HOA no longer stands for Homeowners Association. It stands for Hell on Arrival. We had only just moved into East Summit 5 days ago. We hadn't even hung up the artwork, hadn't updated our driver's license, still didn't know where the can opener was. Then that morning, I stepped outside to grab the paper and saw it, blazing orange, like it had come straight from an alien checkpoint. Violation notice. Mailbox not in approved color. Please repaint within 72 hours to avoid penalty. The paper was taped dead center on the mailbox with screaming red duct tape, as if someone really wanted the whole neighborhood to know I'd committed a crime against color coordination. I stood there for a long moment, coffee cooling in my hand, eyes locked on the word non-compliance like it had just grown fangs. We hadn't even unpacked the dishes. Rebecca, my wife, was still asleep after 3 days of cross-country driving. When she finally came down, hair in a messy bun, oversized t-shirt draped off one shoulder, I handed her the notice without saying a word. She glanced at it, one eyebrow raised, flipped it over like she was hoping there'd be a punchline on the back. Mailbox paint code violation? Her voice was dry as toast left in the car for a week. What did we move into? Stepford Wives meets parking enforcement. I chuckled under my breath, but a chill ran down my spine. Not because of the notice, but because of how Rebecca reacted. No panic. No anger. No calls to the HOA hotline. Just a slight tilt of her head, a sip of cold coffee, and, "Did you post this to the Neighborhood Watch Facebook group yet?" I glanced around. Nobody in sight. Just manicured lawns trimmed like boot camp drills, shiny SUVs, and a silence so precise it felt like everyone was watching from behind their curtains. For a second, I wondered, had we unknowingly signed over our souls in the closing paperwork? I thought we didn't have an HOA? I said, half statement, half question. Rebecca opened her laptop without a word and started combing through the house purchase contract. That's who she is, calm, surgical, and somehow always 2 moves ahead. Like playing chess against the FBI. I looked at her and thought of the day we met. A gray morning in a corner coffee shop, where she was calmly dismantling some stranger's argument about the difference between civil rights and constitutional rights. She won. Not by yelling, just with a glance and 3 perfectly cited legal statutes. Back then, I had no idea she was the youngest sheriff in Travis County history. But I knew she was different. And today, watching her hold that bright orange violation notice like it was a top-level intel memo, I saw it all over again. We don't know what lies ahead in this resort-looking neighborhood. But I know one thing. If someone thinks they can turn our lives into a bureaucratic nightmare, they're about to meet a storm no warning notice can prepare them for. Because the woman doing the dishes in our kitchen isn't just my wife. She's the sheriff. And the mailbox? That was just the opening act. Less than a week after the whole mailbox paint ultimatum, the second citation showed up, this time neatly tucked under the windshield wiper of Rebecca's SUV. The reason? Obstructive driveway parking, $125 fine. Repeat offenses may result in escalation. I looked at her SUV, parked dead center in our own driveway, tires aligned, not touching the curb, not blocking the sidewalk, and wondered, Were we living in some HOA version of 1984, with Big Brother replaced by clipboard-wielding lawn snitches? Rebecca said nothing. She held up the notice, squinting at it like it was a misprinted treasure map. Then she went back inside, sat down at the table, and opened her laptop. At the time, I thought she was just looking for a weird clause in our contract. But in reality, she was already tracking the imposter behind it all. That evening, while I was mowing the front lawn, I noticed a strange man standing across the street. He held a telephoto lens the size of a fire hydrant, and he was taking photos of our trash bins. Not the landscaping, not the koi pond by the porch. The trash bins. He wore a brown windbreaker, had a radio clipped to his hip, and sported a shiny badge on his chest, like a low-budget cosplay version of a town fair security officer. "Good afternoon," he called out, walking over. "I'm Sergeant Daniels with the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Council." I nodded, trying to stay polite even as my brain screamed words not suitable for children. "Oh, I didn't know this neighborhood had an HOA." "We're not an HOA," he replied, pulling out a laminated ID card. Blurry photo, bold letters. Valid through December 2021. It was April of 2025. "We're a new initiative, streamlined, action-oriented. And your household currently has 3 active violations." He flipped open a clipboard like he was about to hand me a parking ticket. Before I could even respond, he continued. "We'll need to inspect the inside of your garage, just to ensure there are no objects obstructing neighbor visibility." I laughed. Loud, sharp, and more than a little bitter. "Unless you've got a warrant or a time machine to update that expired ID," I said. "I suggest you get off my lawn." His face darkened. "Non-cooperation will be noted," he muttered, pulling out a small notebook and writing something down like he was signing a death sentence. When I told Rebecca, she didn't laugh. She didn't get angry. She just sat down, reopened the housing contract, and scanned line by line, until she pointed at a bolded paragraph. "This property is not subject to any homeowners association, HOA governance." She saved the file, renamed it evidence_no HOA.pdf. Then she opened 3 more tabs. County tax records, property boundary maps, list of state-licensed community organizations. I looked at her. "What are you doing?" Rebecca smiled, peeling off the mask of these wannabe heroes. And in that moment I knew. They thought they were bullying some small-town couple new to the neighborhood. But they had picked the wrong house. Because Rebecca isn't some coupon-clipping housewife. She's a badge-wearing nightmare. They just haven't realized it yet. That afternoon, sunlight filtered through the maple trees of East Summit, casting golden streaks on the sidewalk like strokes of yellow paint. Emma, our 6-year-old daughter, sat out front in dusty overalls, chalk all over her knees, drawing a giant smiling face at her feet. She was humming to herself, adding a rainbow, a 3-legged dog, and in big, shaky letters, "Welcome home." It was the first time since we moved here that I'd seen her genuinely smile. No more fear of the trash bin that beeps when it shuts. No more mixing up street names. No more asking, "Can we go back to our old house?" And then I saw him, a man across the street, phone raised, pointed directly at my daughter. Not sneaky, not subtle, just standing there, bold as daylight, recording like he was gathering evidence. As if the crime was a kid drawing with chalk. I stepped quickly onto the curb. "What are you doing?" I asked, sharp. Beige windbreaker, baseball cap worn backwards, plastic badge swinging from his belt, another sergeant cosplay clown. No introduction, just a stiff nod. "We received a report. Sidewalk is public property. Unauthorized markings must be documented." I stared at him, stunned. "She's 6. It's chalk. What exactly are you documenting?" "Could be considered a visual nuisance to community aesthetic," he droned monotone. "A formal warning will be issued if the behavior continues." I didn't respond, just turned around and scooped Emma into my arms. She didn't understand. She just wanted to show me the happy face she drew with both hands. I nodded and forced a smile. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." But inside me, something cold dropped like a stone into my stomach. I used to be the easygoing type, the one who let things go. But when a stranger stands in the street and films your daughter for drawing a rainbow, that's not inconvenience. That's danger. That night, I told Rebecca. She was sorting through a pile of documents on the East Summit Safety Board and Sergeant Daniel's expired fake badge. When I told her what happened with Emma, her hands froze. Her eyes darkened. Not with rage, but with the kind of calm, sharp focus that makes steel look soft. "We're adding 2 more cameras at the front," she said. "You think they'll come back?" She didn't answer right away. She opened a digital map of the neighborhood, marked 3 points. Where Daniels had stood, where the man took photos of Emma, and the nearest traffic camera. She was building a model, tracking their movement. "They don't care who's new, who's old, who's a child," she said. "They want control. Any way they can get it. And if no one stands up to them, there will be more Emmas." I looked out the window. Where my daughter had sat that day, the rain had already blurred her chalk drawing. Just smudges now. The smiling face made by little hands. Gone. We used to believe in that phrase. Home is where the heart is. But now we saw the truth. If you don't protect that heart, even home isn't safe. And Rebecca? She had just decided she wasn't going to let that happen again. From the moment that man raised his phone at Emma, Rebecca didn't hesitate for a single second. The next morning, she went into the garage and pulled out a box I'd always assumed was full of old electronics. Nope. Inside were 4 covert-grade surveillance cameras, the kind she used back when she was a district-level special investigator. "Why do we even have these?" I asked, both surprised and slightly concerned. Rebecca didn't look up. "You know I don't like surprises. Especially not from guys with badges printed on inkjet paper." Within 3 hours, our house had a surveillance system that could rival a downtown jewelry store. 1 camera mounted on the garage roof, aimed straight at the driveway. 1 hidden inside the mailbox. Yes, the same one that got the first violation. 1 tucked inside the porch lantern, pretty on the outside, crystal clear video on the inside. And the last, nestled deep in the lavender bushes by the gate, right where those neighborhood patrol creeps liked to linger. "This isn't just about prevention anymore," Rebecca said. "We need evidence. And I'm going to get it." On the 3rd day after installing the cameras, while I was mowing the backyard, Rebecca called me inside with a low voice. "You need to see this." On her laptop screen, Daniels, wearing a navy polo, his same dangling badge, was back. This time with 2 assistants I'd never seen before. They were measuring the height of our fence with a tape measure. One of them had his head halfway inside our trash can, inspecting it like he was searching for uranium. No doorbell. No knocking. No permission. They moved around the property like federal agents, or more accurately, like con artists playing pretend as code inspectors. The 3 of them paced slowly, jotting notes on their fake clipboards, snapping pictures, and finally posted another bright orange notice on our front window. "Final warning. Landscaping noncompliance. Immediate correction required." Rebecca paused the footage at the exact moment sunlight hit Daniel's badge. She zoomed in, adjusted the contrast, tilted the frame slightly. "See it?" she asked. I squinted. "See what?" "The star has 6 points," she said. "A real sheriff badge has 7. And the eagle's upside down." She flipped to another tab, official badge photos from county records. Sharp. Official. Serial-coded. Daniel's badge looked like it had been laminated at the strip mall print shop. "It's not just a fake HOA anymore," she said. "He's impersonating real law enforcement." I swallowed hard. "That's a felony." Rebecca nodded, stone-faced. "Impersonating an officer. On private property. On camera. With threats and unauthorized inspection. If they think this is a game, they're about to run out of turns." That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She went into the basement and set up a whiteboard. She mapped everything, every incident, every appearance, every face, every license plate. At the top of the board, she wrote the name in bold red marker. Operation Boardwatch. This wasn't defense anymore. This was the hunt. And those men wrapped in fake authority, hiding behind plastic badges and clipboards. They had just stepped into the worst battlefield imaginable. One where Sheriff Rebecca Monroe runs the cameras. And the law is finally back in the right hands. I always thought Mrs. Keller was the quintessential suburban neighbor. Silver hair, buttoned-up cardigan. The kind of woman who left warm apple pies on your windowsill during the holidays. She lived alone in the house across the street, with a little dog named Waffles and a collection of porcelain planters that Rebecca once jokingly called the honor guard of East Summit. So when Mrs. Keller knocked on our door that evening, no pie, no warning, Rebecca knew instantly something was wrong. She didn't come inside. She just stood at the doorstep, glancing up and down the street like she was being watched. Her frail hand gripped her purse tightly, voice shaky but firm. "You're the one, aren't you? The one not afraid of them?" Rebecca nodded. Not a word, just a nod. "Then I need to show you this." From her bag, she pulled a stack of old printouts, creased, some yellowed with time. Among them, a warning notice she received last Christmas. The brightness of your holiday lights exceeds Area 4B illumination limits. If not adjusted within 48 hours, your property may be subject to community enforcement measures. Rebecca skimmed it, frowning. "What's 4B?" Mrs. Keller looked up, no longer afraid, just quiet, simmering anger. "They divide us into zones. Each house has a code. Not postal codes, threat levels." Then she pulled out something that made both Rebecca and me freeze. A color-coded classification chart, full color, stamped with the East Summit Safety Board logo. Green, model resident. Yellow, needs monitoring. Orange, uncooperative behavior. Red, special target, resistance/influence risk. I was yellow in August, just because I put up my summer flag 5 days early. Then, because I didn't take down my Christmas lights on time, they moved me to orange. Rebecca went still. Then, Mrs. Keller whispered. The letters started. Legal threats. Saying my property didn't meet community standards. That they had the right to recommend for sale if I didn't comply. "But this isn't a real HOA," I said, trying to stay calm. "They don't have that kind of authority." She nodded, her voice trembling. "I know. But my neighbors don't. The elderly, the alone, the vulnerable. Who's going to stand up to someone with a badge, a clipboard, and a voice that sounds official?" Then she looked straight at Rebecca. "I heard you were a cop. Is that true?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "Still am." "Good." Mrs. Keller reached into her purse one more time and pulled out a USB drive. "This has scanned copies of the citations I secretly saved when I was invited to collaborate as a zone assistant. I recorded everything, internal titles, patrol maps, even internal emails." Rebecca took it like it was evidence in a federal smuggling case. "They call themselves the SNSB Command Council. They have ranks, codes, a list of high-risk residents." I whispered, "Like a mafia?" "No," Mrs. Keller said. "Worse. At least the mafia doesn't make you take down your Christmas lights." That night, after Mrs. Keller left, Rebecca didn't speak. She stood in front of the whiteboard in the basement, which by now wasn't just a timeline. It was a battlefield map. And with that USB, handed to her by a quiet old woman everyone thought just grew flowers, Rebecca had something the con artists never expected. A whistleblower in the shadows, ready to burn down the system, with 4 gigabytes of truth. I always thought I was a calm guy, not the type to get mad easily, not the type to lose it in a checkout line or punch someone for cutting me off. But in a neighborhood where even your flower pots can be labeled a visual harmony threat, you don't have to do anything to be accused. That morning, I was watering the plants when a gray SUV pulled up. No horn, no heads up, just a screeching stop in front of our driveway. 3 people stepped out in East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board uniforms, like a low-budget version of the FBI. One of them was Daniels, clipboard in hand, with the smug look of a museum security guard who thinks he's guarding the Pentagon. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I knew the roof camera was rolling, recording every step they took, every phone snap of our trash bins, every ridiculous attempt to measure our flower beds with a Home Depot tape measure. I planned to stay still. Just observe. Until one of them, round face, sweat-drenched, voice like a dying cheerleader, suddenly screamed. He touched me. He shoved me. I'm reporting an assault. I blinked. Wait, what? He staggered back, pulled out his phone, filming me like it was the climax of some extremist documentary. Subject appears agitated. Possible threat. Requesting backup. 45 minutes later, a real cruiser, local police, pulled up. I was handcuffed on my own front steps. In front of my daughter. In front of an entire street peeking out from behind curtains. In holding, all I could think was one thing. Rebecca will know what to do.
And she did.
2 hours later, she walked into the station. No shouting. No panic. Just purpose. She brought a laptop, footage from the home cams, zoning maps, and a file I had never seen before. Yes, NSB escalation strategy. Confidential. She placed it on the interrogation room table like it was a congressional hearing. I have video evidence proving the accusation against my husband was fabricated, she said, voice steady, level, sharp. And beyond that, the individuals making the accusation are engaged in organized illegal activity. On the screen, me, standing still, garden hose in hand, not moving, not touching anyone. Meanwhile, the so-called victim takes a deliberate step back, gently hits the fence, then starts screaming like he'd been shot. Rebecca paused the video at the perfect moment. He looks directly at the camera, knows he's being recorded, and still runs the script. Then she opened the file. Page 1. Stage 1. Issue warning citations. Page 2. Stage 2. Build a profile. Non-cooperative resident. Page 3. Stage 3. Provoke physical contact. Document incident. Page 4. Stage 4. Call actual law enforcement. A campaign designed like a role-playing game, but the goal is real. Push people into legal chaos. Force them out of their homes. Rebecca ended with a line that, I was later told, made the attending officer's jaw drop. If you keep my husband here, you're detaining a victim, not a suspect. And I will bring in the press. 3 hours later, I was released. At the same time, the police opened a formal investigation into the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. When I walked out of that holding cell, I saw Rebecca waiting. Hands in pockets. Eyes on her phone. She didn't smile. She just said, they played their hand. Now it's our turn. And I knew this battle had entered a new phase. Because Rebecca wasn't just fighting to clear my name. She was dismantling a system, rooted in lies and clipboard tyranny. And that system had just made the biggest mistake of its life. That night's community meeting took place in an old rec center at the bottom of the hill, once a tennis clubhouse back when East Summit's HOA was a legal entity nearly 20 years ago. Now, it was the self-declared headquarters of the fake organization spreading fear across the neighborhood. Rebecca and I arrived early. She wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, but in her eyes, I recognized the woman I'd once seen walk out of court after winning 3 criminal cases in a row. She wasn't wearing her badge. She didn't need to. The moment she stepped into that flickering fluorescent-lit room with 24 folding chairs, heads turned. We weren't there to attend a meeting. We were there to end it. Daniels stood at the far end of the room, clipboard in hand, head slightly tilted like a wannabe director waiting for his cue. Pinned to his chest was the same cheap aluminum badge, now scratched at the edges. Beside him stood the council chair, a slick-haired man who looked like a car salesman one deal away from a breakdown. Thank you all for coming, Daniels began, voice rehearsed, almost theatrical. Tonight we'll vote on fence height regulations and updated trash bin inspection schedules. Rebecca raised her hand. I have a question before you begin. The room went still. Daniels squinted. Who elected you? Rebecca asked, calm as if she were ordering off a lunch menu. We're a volunteer group, serving community interests, he replied, his tone slightly flustered. We don't need democracy. She cut in, pulling out a printed photo of his fake badge. Then who gave you the authority to wear this? Daniels straightened up like he'd been challenged in a duel. He stepped into the center of the room. Who are you to question me? The question hung in the thick air, right as he suddenly pulled something black from his waistband. For a split second, the room exploded. Someone screamed. Folding chairs clattered. A woman crashed into the display table. Someone whispered, "Call 911," into a trembling phone. Daniels pointed what looked like a gun straight at Rebecca. "Meeting's over. Step back. All of you." I froze. One thought echoed in my head. Dear God, don't let him pull that trigger. I braced to step forward, but Rebecca didn't flinch. She took a slow, deliberate step ahead. Not fast. Not afraid. Like she was walking into a press conference she'd been to 100 times. She looked him straight in the eye, not with anger, not with fear, but with that cold, clear stare of forged steel. Then she said 4 words. "I'm Sheriff Rebecca Monroe." I have never heard silence like that before. No breathing. No chair creaks. Just the pounding of my own heart and the sense that something monumental had just shifted, right in front of the entire neighborhood. Daniels blinked. You're lying," he whispered, voice crumbling like a broken radio. Rebecca tilted her head. "Want to test that? My radio's on. Dispatch is waiting for my check-in. And that gun, Daniels, it's not a prop anymore. It's a felony." His hand shook. He clutched the plastic pistol like he could still fool someone for 1 more minute. Then, like a rusted hinge, he let go. Clack. The sound of the fake gun hitting the tile floor was the sound of a verdict. Rebecca stepped forward. No shouting. No threats. Just pointed at the folding chair beside him. "Sit down." And he did. The man who had terrorized an entire street with orange citations and cheap clipboards sat like a child caught stealing cookies. From that moment on, the game was over. But the investigation had just begun. Because now the whole room had seen what I always knew. She didn't need to flash a badge. She didn't need to raise her voice. She just had to say her name. And the entire lie collapsed. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds like any other day. But East Summit was no longer the peaceful neighborhood it pretended to be. Sirens echoed from the base of the hill. Red and blue lights spun against the freshly painted white walls of the old community center. The same building that had hosted the final meeting of the fake HOA regime. But this time, it wasn't clipboard cosplay and misspelled badges. It was real law enforcement. Search warrants in hand. Body cams on. And the steady confidence of people who knew they were doing the right thing. Rebecca led the investigative team like it was her 100th operation. Calm, precise, methodical. I walked beside her, still trying to process what had happened the night before. A toy gun, a complete collapse, and Daniel's face when he heard 3 words. Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. Inside the fake HOA headquarters, formerly the tennis club office from 2002, was a hive of administrative crime. 3 color printers ran nonstop, spitting out final warnings in blood-red font. Violation Code 4B. Property may be subject to forced compliance. A second drawer held over 60 fake badges, all laminated, all featuring 6-point stars instead of 7. A small design flaw, now key evidence in a case of impersonating a public official. On the wall, a map of the neighborhood color-coded by compliance level. Green, cooperative. Yellow, minor disruption. Red, high-risk target. Our house was circled in bold red, underlined twice. But the real gut punch was another map. Expansion plan, Phase 2. 3 new neighborhoods marked in bold. Red pushpins stabbed into each one. Beside them, a chilling note. Recruit insiders. Begin fake violation campaign within 30 days. Apply East Summit model. Rebecca stared at the map, unblinking. They didn't just want this neighborhood. They were building a fake HOA empire. Officer Ortiz, young, sharp, and leading the financial sweep, rushed and holding a PayPal printout. We found the account collecting the fines. Name, Leonard Brandt Jr. Registered address, small town 30 miles out. Occupation, freelance graphic designer. Rebecca nodded. Dryly. Nephew of the council president. Fits the profile. The entire operation, funneling money from elderly, single, and vulnerable residents, led directly to the digital wallet of a guy dressed like a failed tech founder, who spent his days designing phony citations and badges to terrorize decent people into silence. We also uncovered their printed manual. Enforcement Escalation Strategy. Bound. Indexed. Step by step. Step 1. Friendly warning letter. Step 2. Shift to legal language. Create perceived obligation. Step 3. Appear in person with stern tone. Step 4. If necessary, provoke physical contact. Record incident. At the bottom, handwritten. Highly effective with vulnerable residents, especially widows or those living alone. I turned away, swallowing a wave of nausea. No one imagined that a quiet suburban cul-de-sac could be turned into a power game for a handful of petty tyrants, people who didn't need laws, just printers, plastic badges, and the silence of their neighbors. But silence had been broken, and thanks to Rebecca, light had finally poured into the corners they thought no one would ever notice. They weren't just arrested for impersonation. They were exposed for something far worse. For believing no one would ever dare ask, "Who are you really?" Bryce McCrae didn't look like a movie villain. No facial scar. No maniacal grin. No dusty fedora like some old-school mobster. He showed up at the police station in a clean polo shirt, hair parted neatly, and the smug look of someone who thought he'd just been arrested for understanding the law too well. But his record told a different story. Rebecca recognized the name the moment the young officer read it from the booking file. Bryce Leonard McCrae, 38 years old. Previously served 3 years in prison for impersonating a state official. Who was he on the board? I asked. Head of Internal Security, Rebecca replied, voice dry as stone. In other words, the guy who wrote laws no one questioned. And that's exactly what he was. On a confiscated computer from the HOA's central office, police found a 143-page Word document titled East Summit Protocol, Rebuilding Community Through Proactive Control. Author? Bryce McCrae. It outlined an entire blueprint for soft coercion. Creates social pressure via legal-sounding threat letters. Establish resident ranking systems based on compliance. Propose forced property sales under the guise of community interest. Never allow the organization's legitimacy to be questioned. And there it was, one line italicized, in bold red, like blood on the page. Fear is the cheapest and most effective tool. Don't waste it. Rebecca tapped her knuckles on the table. He's not just a fake. He's the brain behind this entire machine. And like any manipulation system, the real damage wasn't in the files. It was in the people. That afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Jensen, an elderly couple from the end of Gardenia Street, came forward. He was a retired schoolteacher. His hands trembled as he held out a violation letter. Accumulated fines, $925. Failure to pay may result in property enforcement under Community Clause 3A. They'd sold their prized stamp collection, 40 years in the making, a wedding gift from his wife, just to pay the fines. Because they didn't know. They didn't understand the law. They only understood that someone with a badge and an official tone had knocked on their door. We just didn't want to lose our home, Mrs. Jensen said, eyes glassy. We didn't do anything wrong. Rebecca gently held her hand. You didn't. The only wrong here is that someone like McCrae was allowed to operate this long. But the breath-stealing discovery was what came next. In another file, labeled Operation Widening Shield, McCrae had listed 2 neighboring communities. Brookhaven Ridge, ready for Phase 1 HOA simulation test. Clearwater Pines, high senior population, low resistance probability. The plan was fully scheduled. Names of assigned enforcers. Pre-written violation templates. Even a trust-building strategy that involved hiring actors in uniforms to stand guard at gated entrances. They hadn't just conned East Summit. They were building a franchise of fear, turning anxiety into a scalable business model. But Rebecca got there first. With the files, the witness testimonies, and a paper trail of legal missteps Daniels and McCrae couldn't undo, the district attorney formally charged them with impersonating public officials. extortion and coerced asset transfer. And the most serious, conspiracy to commit multi-community fraud. I looked at Rebecca, the woman they had dismissed as the wife of the new guy. Now the one who brought an empire to its knees. She didn't smile. She simply nodded once and said, "Who else is left? We're not done turning over stones." That evening, the community center parking lot was packed. Cars stretched down the hill, wrapped around the corner, parked beside porch lanterns and mailboxes once feared. People arrived carrying nothing. Some brought folding chairs. One woman carried an entire tub of homemade cookies. The air didn't feel like a town hall meeting. It felt like a holiday, something this neighborhood hadn't dared to dream of for nearly a year. Rebecca stepped up to the old wooden podium. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood a whiteboard filled with names of affected neighborhoods, forged maps from the fake HOA, criminal documentation, and at the center, bold letters in thick black marker. Truth needs no fake badge. She wore her full uniform. The 7-point sheriff's star gleamed under the stage lights. No gavel. No booming declaration. Just one opening line. "I'm Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. And tonight, I'm not here to warn you. I'm here to end this." The room held its breath. Then she continued, her voice clear and steady. "All fines issued have been declared invalid. Refunds will be processed through the county office. Anyone threatened, coerced, or filmed without consent will receive protection and assistance through the Community Witness Program." Some in the crowd cried. I saw Mr. Jensen clutch his wife's hand. A young woman held up a red-lettered envelope marked "Final Warning" and quietly tore it into pieces. "We've worked with the district attorney. Every individual involved in the fake East Summit HOA will be prosecuted for impersonating public officials, for extortion, and for conspiring to spread this fraud to other communities." Applause broke out. Not loud, not wild, but deep, like a final stamp sealing a long overdue verdict. Then Rebecca did something that almost made me laugh through the tears. She pulled out the very first citation we'd received, that bright orange mailbox color violation. She held it up for the room to see. "This is where it started. And this is where it ends." She went on to say she'd framed it, hung it behind her desk, just above her criminal case files. Underneath it, in bold black ink, her own handwriting. "Nice try." The room erupted. Someone whistled. A kid shouted, "She's a superhero." And in that moment, under soft stage lights, as people stood to cheer, Rebecca looked exactly like a modern symbol of justice. No cape, no catchphrase, just truth, courage, and a framed fake citation like a trophy from a battle well won. 1 week later, on a Friday night, East Summit held its first real community event in months. Freedom from Fines Friday. No warning letters. No fear of curtain peekers. People dragged chairs out to the lawns. Kids kicked soccer balls. Grown-ups laughed. Twinkle lights blinked in every color. Even the ice cream truck came by. Rebecca brought cookies, her famous oatmeal raisin ones. Emma still hated them, but this time, she ate too. I turned on some AC/DC from a Bluetooth speaker. A neighbor clinked cups with me. "You know," he said, "I never thought I'd see a real sheriff in this neighborhood." I looked over at Rebecca, laughing, radiant, surrounded by kids. "Not just a real sheriff," I replied. "She's the last person any scam artist ever wants to mess with." From that day on, the kids started calling her the Sheriff of Suburbia. And every time someone new moved in, all they had to hear was the story of the orange citation and how it met its end. Because in East Summit now, there's a symbol on the wall, a piece of paper, one short line, "Nice try," and the whole neighborhood knows. No one's stupid enough to try again.